My guest today brings a perspective you don't often hear in hospitality. He's a strategist, a marketeer, and a working actor. Someone who understands presence, timing, subtext, and emotional containment at the professional level. Together we unpacked what luxury really feels like, how staff can really read the room without a script, and why the smallest micro-moment often define the entire stay. If you believe luxury should leave guests feeling better than when they arrived, this conversation is for you. Welcome to the Social Hotelier. My guest is Kyle Merrick. He's the creator of anarchyforaday.com, where he reframes anarchy as tactical differentiation by helping leaders rethink the rules, apply them intelligently, and carve out their own blue oceans.
Sam, it's a real pleasure. Great intros too. I'm very excited for this conversation. I think this is a very interesting overlap of topics that I don't think enough people are really touching on.
Well, this is something I have dreamed about doing for a long time, and it took me this long to meet you so we can get started.
Hey, we're here now. Why not capitalize on the moment?
That's right. So, but I remember when we last talked that you have one time in your life or a career you worked in a hotel, and if I'm not mistaken, it was in Costa Rica or it was in somewhere in Central America.
It was Costa Rica. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So could you tell me a little bit about that experience to understand the context of hospitality that you learned, regardless of how long you were there, but you must have felt and learned something about that guest, creating guest experiences and so on.
Absolutely. I'll back it up because I think the moment that you were referencing was specifically in 2021, so still kind of mid-COVID. The journey to Costa Rica began back, I believe this is December 2017. My parents had initially planned to be on a beautiful cruise from Costa Rica down to Panama. However, at that time, my mom was still in chemotherapy, and so she was not actually able to join my dad on that cruise. And so he says, "All right, well, why don't you come with me?" So naturally, I oblige, and it was on that cruise that each day is a different stop. And so one of them was what the Ticos refer to as Bahia de Drake, in other words, Drake Bay. And it's on the Osa Peninsula, very small Pacific side town with, maybe roughly 400 people. And so we got off and we're walking around, and it was a blazing hot day. And we're like, gosh, if we can get something cold and refreshing, that would be fantastic. And so we saw this kind of restaurant cafe just jutting out of the jungle, and walked up and ended up chatting with the individuals there by the names of at the time it was Jens, and then we shortly thereafter met Patrick. And it turns out that this restaurant that we'd sort of stumbled upon, that was the restaurant. It was the main lobby. It was a standalone building structure. The rest of the dwellings for this respective boutique were sort of blotched up the hill just behind them. And so what we found out is, all right, this was an eco-luxury boutique resort, which, we only had about 45 minutes to actually hang out and get to know these guys, understand their story. And it was a heck of a story. They ended up, meeting here in the States. They ended up purchasing land from one of their, respective dads. And that is where they very simply built this hotel up from the ground up. So all of that being said, we had to get back on the boat. And I think I'd taken a couple pictures, and, I get home back to Ohio, where I was living at the time. And I sent the pics off to them, and they said, hey, we need somebody to come capture the hotel because we're in Forbes Travel Guide. And we need, the presence to be much more significant than what we have right now. So, all right, I go back shortly thereafter in 2018, and I worked with them for about 10 days, shooting the hotel and all that good stuff. So that back in 2018 was sort of the first starting point of some of my understanding of, what goes on behind the scenes in the world of real high-end hospitality. And then back in 2021, I think I'd gone through a breakup, work stress was just piling on. It was, COVID, everybody's kind of cooped up. So I was very blessed to have these individuals in my network and have maintained a friendship with them. And I very simply just called them up and I said, look, I have to reset. What are the chances that I can, just come out, volunteer at the hotel, but I need to just not be, everything that I'm doing here for, business and whatever my life is, I need this to be completely gone for a little bit while I'm in Costa Rica. And so we determined that, all right, go there for a month, volunteer at the hotel, work, stay at their personal house, all that good stuff. And then the following month is very simply just solo travel, just to simmer, I believe, on whatever came out of that experience.
If they hear that, I'm never going to work again. Seriously?
Before we wrap up, make sure you stay with us until the very end. That's when we shift into Off the Mic, a relaxed, fireside-style conversation where the formal interview drops away and you get to hear the real stories, the personal insights, and the human side behind the professional persona. Oh, I'm so screwed.
While you were working there, at the time you were there, did you have some guest contact jobs where you were meeting guests, or were you more working in the support areas? What was that experience for you?
I was meeting guests. I was not a front-facing individual in the hotel, because the majority work that I was doing, whether we're referencing the 2018 experience or the 2021, both jobs, respectively, were sort of the things that need to happen on the back end, behind the scenes in a way.
So just the thing is that you have experienced the atmosphere of a hotel. You see how the hotel works in many ways, whether it's in the support area, but also you see the action going on in the front. And taking that experience that you have as a professional actor, and if you put your mindset in that being in the hotel, and you, as an actor, if I understand, you are an observer of your surroundings continuously.
That is absolutely true, yes.
Yeah. What should, if you would mentoring some staff or young people who want to get into the hotel industry, because usually the things they say, well, you have to have a service mind, you like to serve. Of course, if you have that, a lot of things get easy. But then on the other hand, there's always that how confident one is dealing with the guests you never met before, because you may have to try to figure out what can you do for them that have a great stay. So what I'm saying is that what should staff learn to notice in the first 10 seconds of a guest arrival? You imagine you're at the reception or the front desk, and there's a guest walking in. What are the things that you as an actor, and if you would be in front of the guest or the receptionist, what are the things you should learn to notice in those 10 first seconds so you can have an idea how to deal with a guest?
Well, it's a very interesting question. And I think part of, the consideration, if we're essentially thinking like, all right, how do we bring the experience of the actor into the experience of the hotelier, whoever it may be underneath the very broad umbrella. Okay, so the way that I would probably break it down, if I'm over intellectualizing here, which I'm probably known to do, is to say, okay, let's think about the standard guest experience. And we're not assigning any specific culture. This is just the individual who is staying at the hotel, either for work or for pleasure. I think it could probably fairly easily be broken down like that. The guest experience, think about that like the script of the film or the episode, whatever you want to call it. And so the script, like generally speaking, there are going to be key plot points that need to be hit that sort of inform the main sort of, portions that have to be hit. In other words, if if you're doing your job as the actor, then this is essentially the goal. This is what has to be achieved. This is your personal mission within that script. Same kind of deal as the hotelier. Essentially, your main mission is to ensure that your guests are feeling happy, safe, comfortable, all that good stuff. Now, the question more specifically being, okay, what are the first, you have 10 seconds to observe the individual as they enter into your hotel. What is it that you would observe? I would look at the mood. Are these individuals rushed? Are they disturbed by something they saw, experienced on the way here outside the hotel? Or, are they overtly calm? And I would consider culturally, where is it that these individuals are from? What about their specific culture will inform their own expectations? Because, that's the deal is in the hotel business, it's the enmeshment, it's the crossroads of different cultures, and different people have different ways of being, very simply. I think that's probably one of the most important, most interesting aspects of being in the hotel industry is accounting for the different cultural components. Europeans eat at a very different speed than Americans, for instance. Like that's just a glaring example in my mind. That especially in the Costa Rica hotel, that was something that I very much came to learn based on, these hoteliers had received specific feedback from Europeans saying like, slow down. We like to enjoy our meals.
Yes.
And they had award-winning food. They did a spectacular job too. So yeah, I like to swing it back to the question. I think like if you're focusing on specific things, I would just immediately look at, what is the emotional sort of physical state of the beings that are walking into my space right now?
Yeah.
Because that will then inform everything of
Sure.
how you welcome it. Do these people want to tolerate long conversation? Are they just looking for like a quick answer?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Yeah. If I understand correctly what the word, actors read energy before words. What are the clear signals a guest is anxious, depleted, or guarded, and how should you as the team member respond without becoming intrusive?
A lot of this comes down to what I would consider to be simply nonverbal communication, and that is a huge component. If you're in the hotel industry, understanding how to read nonverbal, signs, communications, it's key. If somebody is incapable of making eye contact, perhaps that means, okay, there are nerves at play, and maybe why the nerves exist, we don't know. It's not your job to know. If somebody is moving very quickly, they could be very anxious. They could be worried, scared, something like that. Perhaps even a little fired up, angered. Generally speaking, the individuals that move more slowly, perhaps cautiously, but in a more calculated manner, I would attribute that to, okay, well, this individual is in a more calm, confident state of being and mind. And so this would probably be an individual having, some sort of a civil exchange with. The rest, if somebody's in a flustered state of mind, then I would very simply just say, hi, welcome, and, just accept the energy.
Yeah.
And the key is not to absorb or, allow any of that to come out in my own communication. It's just I see you, I accept you, I hear you.
Yeah.
And
very good.
All I need to do is just get my information out to you in a very succinct manner, if that's the case.
in acting, timing is everything. Where do hotels usually rush the guest emotionally, and what should staff slow down, even if it costs a few seconds operationally?
For me, because I'm not going to say this is like gospel, but every time I'm in a hotel, there's always that like lingering feeling in the morning of, am I going to get the knock on the door from the housekeeper?
Yeah.
That is the one moment. It's like, waiters and waitresses come and they're like, "Hey, how's your food?" This is, I know you're in Finland, but like in the States, at least in restaurants, how is everything? It's not uncommon that, the wait staff will ask that. And um, that's another one of those things too. It's like, things are good. If we're not like chirping up to say like, "Hey, you forgot something, or can we get something else?" Like, we'll make you aware that we need some help. But like, there's a level where, okay, now this is intrusive to essentially the conversation that I'm having. This is a super trivial, and I'm not saying like I don't tip wait staff or anything like that. I'm not, a jerk like that. But it's just sometimes wait staff come too frequently.
Yes.
To the point that it disrupts the meal. In a way that translates sometimes to housekeeping. Sometimes hotels will have, the housekeepers, like I was at a hotel in New York, and the housekeepers will essentially kind of roam the floor to understand, okay, who is in, who's out, and, they'll have a little bit more of a finger on the pulse there, which is a great way of doing it, keeping the interaction, I think, much more subtle between, guests and staff, but, it's not easily maintained, from what I can tell. So that's one of those points that I'm like, it's always the housekeeping staff.
Yeah. Well, I had I was fortunate to work in every department, and I know that the pressure we had in housekeeping was to get the room clean as quickly as possible. At that time, we didn't have the technology to be able to see from kind of an app whether there's a guest in the room or not. It was just the annoying knock on the door or say something just to get the feel if somebody's in there, and if they're not, if it's quiet, then you just quietly open the door and kind of you say housekeeping, whisper, or room service just to get their attention. Mm-hmm. And if nobody's there, then you get very, very busy and cleaning the room. But in restaurants, one of the things, because I spent quite a bit of time as a waiter in the States, and also had a chance to learn I studied it from people who knew things much better. We were continuously observing. If a couple came to have their meal, we continuously observed how they felt, whether they had a good time or was it a very quiet meal, whether they're just focusing on the food. And we start to learn how to find the right moment to go up to the table, not just forcing to say, is everything okay? Because, I mean, what kind of question you can, as a professional waiter, you should know if it's okay. I mean, you know very quickly if the people are not eating and they look angry and they start to snapping their fingers. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you know something is not right. So it's about sort of the observing, continuously observing, and I admire what actors do, that they are continuously observing their own surroundings. For instance, if they are studying for a character or trying to develop a character, and there is something similar to that we are doing in the working in the hotels also. We're all continuously observing the guests, and we may have an opinion about what kind of people they are. Are they going to stiff us, or are they going to give us a big tip, depending on how that chemistry works between mm-hmm. us. Not only the meal, but just that by the time they are signing the bill or paying the bill, is something going to happen that's going to be worthwhile for them, that they will make that extra effort and make you feel, okay, things worked out. We had a fantastic evening and so on. And so I always feel about that relationship between a stage and a restaurant has some similarities, because that the skill of observing the moment, what's happening, and particularly if there is a moment where things are going wrong, how are you going to kind of, when you have to go in recovery mode?
Yeah.
When things are going wrong, that becomes probably one of the best opportunities to make the biggest tip, because you fix something that was your fault, was somebody's fault, but
That's it.
the guests end up thanking you for fixing it for them.
Yeah. Well, there are numerous different sort of correlations to, the job of the actor to the job of the, in acting, we also think about like this servant sort of character, the waiter, the waitress. There is, when I hear you say observation in acting, what we hear oftentimes is very simply the need to listen. Listen to what is happening. Listening is observing. That's it. And in observation, the script may dictate, okay, well, we have to go down this general direction. But in that moment, the different takes, perhaps we're, improvising a bit, that's where the different flavors come in that could be slightly off script. In other words, if if you're getting a, waiter, like, if you start noting like, okay, something's off. What is this? How can I, based on the confines of what I know of my character or my role, in other words, if I'm tasked to ensure that this couple enjoys this dinner, bar none, or, whatever my character notes are, then, okay, how is it that I operate within the lines? If we're thinking about this, actually, one of the ways that I think about acting quite often is like a coloring book. It's a very trivial example, but the idea very simply being like, you can color as much as you want as long as they are within the lines. Because the moment that you start stepping outside the lines, that's where things stand out to essentially the viewer as being, that doesn't seem like that character would be, would do that or respond that certain way. And it's the same for the waitstaff is, within the bounds of, the lines of what is expected or at least valued, from that sort of a servant individual. How is it that you choose to solve the different problems, ensure that this, couple, whoever's at the table will actually enjoy their meal?
Mm-hmm.
That is, I think, where the fun is, because that's when you technically get to go off book. And it's in those moments, those organic moments that are not planned. You never know what's going to happen. You can probably anticipate though, but that's what typically garners the, hopefully, I mean, if it's handled well, best, but most unique, most significant reactions from the individuals is it's what's unexpected. And the moment somebody has a problem solved, it's this like epiphany moment. It's great.
Yeah. I have a small anecdote. When I was a waiter, there was a time when I followed heavyweight boxing. I was really a fan of heavyweight boxing matches.
Were you yourself a boxer?
And the boxers.
Were you a boxer as well?
No.
Okay.
No, never had any gloves, but I enjoyed watching on TV, and I followed that intensity in boxing. Mm-hmm. So one evening, when I was working, there was two couples actually having a meal, and they were talking about that particular boxing match that was coming up. And so I heard that, and then I got this idea that, well, let's see if I can pull this off. And so after their meal, I was asking them, well, they wanted to have some dessert and coffee, but I said, well, I have something else I have in mind for you. I have a special flamed coffee that is called Muhammad Ali. I just made it up. And the other one is called Joe Fraser, for lack of a better. And I just created this on the spot. And they were so impressed. Actually, it was just something I put together. It was Kahlua and coffee and brandy, whatever it was, and whipped cream, and had a ladle I could flame the whipped cream after that. And that was sort of a glory moment, because I felt that I had done something that they appreciated, because I listened in a little bit about the conversation, and I created a little bit of a moment for them that they had a reason to kind of have fun about the moment. So, because those are the kind of anecdotes.
What I mean. You're coloring, you're using more color, and you're still exactly within the lines of what is within reason and bound.
Yeah.
I admire that moment. Yes.
Yeah. One of the things that we are trying to do in hospitality and in hotels, when you design what we call an arrival ritual, that tells the body you can let go now, or without turning into a scripted theater moment. So, meaning when people are coming in, you are meeting people for the first time, and when it's a scripted arrival ritual, it's very mechanical at its worst. But it also, if it's at its best, it's genuine and people feel welcome. What tip would you give a young person who's starting in her career, that how do you develop the skills of developing an arrival ritual, where you're coming across as a very genuine person to that person who's arriving, and even though you don't have the best of days in your personal life?
Well, there's just basic things, and this is down to the moment that the vehicle pulls up in front of the hotel. Regardless of where this hotel is, how well lit is it? Are you in a good circumstance that people are okay? It's bright. I feel safe, comfortable. The doors are not locked on me; they're open. Perhaps there's an individual standing at the door greeting. It's like, as the individual, which is how you phrase this question. It's a very important consideration from the individual, but I also have to think about the whole. Is you have all of these different pieces, and again, it's the same deal on set. It's like not everybody is going to be delivering the exact top tier quality, yada yada. So you do need to think about the individual. Think, if everybody else is essentially sleeping on the job, you hope not, but if in this circumstance they are, how is it that I can show up and be the best that I can be? That's where you just anticipate their needs, open the car doors for them, heck, from a gentleman's standpoint, if, give the woman a hand, as she's stepping out. I would go as far as to, like, I don't know if there's any need, but cover the crotch area with a hat too if she's wearing a rather slimming dress or something like that. I'd like be the gentleman, grab the bags, offer to help bring everybody in, and be whatever state they're in, that's fine. Your job is to very simply just accommodate their respective needs, whether or not they're even able to verbalize them. Hold the door for them, bring the bags in, make it easier. And, if you have the ability, offer them drink, coffee, water, something. It's just anticipate their needs so they don't have to say a darn thing.
How should staff recover when they feel they missed the moment, misread the guest, interrupted, calm, or over-explained without making it awkward?
Well, one, don't make a show of it.
Yeah.
Because the more that you, essentially shame yourself, like the interesting thing is my current sensei, I'm studying karate right now, and I'm very, very new, very amateur in the art form. And, it's not uncommon that I'll like, get down on myself. Like if I miss a chain of motion, essentially, the self-punishment, the, interior, the negative self-talk. And he says, you know what, just keep going. Don't take that moment. And I'm not saying I'm any, better at it, but this is a point of acknowledgement, is don't get down on yourself. Do not shame yourself. If it is something where, the guest is visibly perturbed, by something that you did, then you apologize. Simply, elegantly, cleanly, and genuinely. Do not over apologize, because then that shows that you're trying to overcompensate. Just, I apologize. I will ensure that this never happens again on my behalf, on the, the entity's behalf. And if it was something more significant, then, okay, well, you're in a point where you're probably going to receive some negotiations, and you better be open to having some sort of a solution in there.
Yeah.
Where you need to be able to make up for that.
Yeah. A handwritten note can be either intimate or generic. I love to write handwritten notes. I used to do that every day to every guest who arrived to the hotel. They always received a handwritten note from me. So yeah, that brings me always memories, because when I stayed in hotels, I have also received handwritten notes. And you can see from the handwriting, it was not the general manager who signed it. I signed it under his name, but from the handwriting, you could clearly say that it was somebody else. And then, so just by your feeling about a handwritten note can be either intimate or generic. What makes a note feel personally written, and what should staff never do if the goal is emotionally sincerity?
Well, first off, what a tremendous practice. Writing a handwritten note to a guest, there is like, you see a lot of things that are technically handwritten, but then you look closer and you just see like, okay, well, this is a photocopy, or, something that was pre-drafted, printed, and, yada, yada. No, somebody did not take pen to paper, respectively, to draft this. Well, that's one thing, is don't pre-draft it. This has to be an original note that is not like boilerplate language. Like just, something, I don't know, tie it to circumstance, tie it to some little detail that's, within the, again, reason and bound. But for me, like personally, my parents, they taught me essentially, like every single Christmas, they said, all right, well, we had a great Christmas, but you can't play with any of those new toys until you've written a thank you note to everybody. Only at the point that you have finished and sent all of those, then you can indulge. So in my own way, the handwritten note is something that's now translated through business, through acting. There's a lot of power to a very genuine, and it doesn't have to be long either. Just a genuine, quick note, a quip, whatever it may be. And it's something that I'm seeing as a completely lost art form for the newer generations, and myself even too. I'm, within the millennial generation. A lot of people simply don't have the same appreciation that it would seem, especially you and myself, have for the handwritten note. So it's something that, like, all right, think about within business, partners, clients, people that you value, doing business with in some capacity. If you are sending nothing else out, a handwritten note is just a touch that will separate you from so many others. And then within the film industry, if you're looking to fund a film and you have, different individuals raising their hand to be producers, you're going to want to take care of them too. It's the same kind of thing. Pamper them with just a little handwritten quip and just say, hey, I appreciate you. I hope you, enjoy your journey with us, and whatever we can do along the way, we'll be here to do it.
Yeah. So, Kyle, if you would have a chance to rehearse a hotel team, like a cast, what would you drill? Listening, reps, tone consistency, transitions, or improvisation? And what would be the script be replaced with?
Well, I would say, all right, get the script down, but do not, you need to know the script inside and out.
Yeah.
But, the reality is, the way that improv comes in is by saying, I've seen actors who will overly rehearse something. So in other words, they know the script and they only know the script. And they're so sort of stuck in the bounds of the script that if something goes off script, they're not able to operate with that interaction in stride. And it just comes off as a problematic moment. In other words, when improv should come into play, they're really not able to do that successfully. Catches them off guard because they're like, well, I wasn't expecting that. That wasn't written down. So the deal is the flexibility and fluidity is key and crucial. So that is one thing that I would say is you need to be able to be ready for that. Be flexible, be fluid. Things will always change. You're in the the space of dealing with human need, and human need is vast and varied. And okay, so understand the script, know it, be flexible and fluid so that you can improvise when needed. But then from there, just know when to stop talking. Sometimes you gotta listen. Get your peepers going, listen, and that's when you simply need to observe. So that would be, I think, the third component, which is, all right, understand the script, be able to improvise, and then listen. Except I would almost put listen as number 2, because if you're not listening, then you don't quite know how to appropriately react, respond, or, adjust whatever circumstances. So those would be 3 really key components, I would say.
Excellent. So I have this is the final question of this episode, because I think we have been touching on your relationship in terms of as an actor to hospitality service and how you see that. And I found it very, very interesting. What is the ultimate test of luxury service? What should a guest physically feel, whether it's the breath, shoulders, or sleep, by the end of the stay? And how can every department contribute to that outcome? That means that now we have housekeeping, we have maybe engineering, we have a restaurant, we have chefs, we have all kinds of people who have been looking after you. But what are the things that how should every department or staff contribute to that outcome of that ultimate test of luxury service?
There's an interest. So I have a background in like commercial lighting, so like from a photo and video standpoint, so not like interior design, but they somewhat translate because it's still lighting within the the theatrical realm. Lighting tells as much of a story as what is spoken and what is not spoken. So there's all right. I'm going to specifically only talk about the lighting and then the personal experience, and then consider lighting to translate to all other things, like having very simply functional plumbing, things like that, to, the way that the toilet flushes. Is it overtly loud? Does it, stun the individual that uses it? Is there a bidet? Things like that. It's just like the lighting is such that it should hit you in certain ways that you never register it as being like, well, they're using like different colored bulbs inadvertently, like one is warm and one is cooler in the same room, and generally speaking, warmer hues are more comforting. Softer lighting that is flattering to the body, doesn't give any hard shadows, things like that when the individual's in the restroom looking at themselves in the mirror, are they like, well, damn, I look good, something like that. That's just one experience, is okay, lighting. But then, the rest of how is it that we call essentially the luxury experience? Everything needs to be kind of happening in lockstep in such a way that it's seamlessly happening quietly behind the scenes. And the quiet is a very key component, because I think if we think about, some of the best, if we've had, hotel stays, and I'm saying this mostly as, the listener or myself, if we can reference a specific hotel stay and think this one was remarkably good. I felt fine. The bed didn't lead to me being like, I had a stiff neck or something like that. The gym was clean. All the weights were put as they should be. It was seemingly sterilized and, spick and span. The coffee was appropriately strong and, made exactly when I needed it at, 6:30 in the morning. It's just the combination of things happening in such a way that the guest feels that they are accounted for, because they're essentially investing in this hotel experience to just ensure that they can keep operating.
Yeah.
And, the hotel should be less of an encumbrance than the individual's daily life is. That's really the fact of the matter. So if somebody is spending a little bit more money on the hotel, then all of a sudden now you are, as the hotelier, taking on this role of you're giving them probably more than they typically experience. So whether that they know to ask for it or not, you need to show them that you know the script inside and out, and that you're ready to have whatever conversation they come to you for. I know that's a very general, broad brushstrokes answer, but
Sure.
if I think about some of the best hotel experiences I've had, that's the general feeling of just calm, comfort, and my life could be complete and utter chaos the moment I step outside the door of this hotel, but the moment I'm in this hotel, this ecosystem, fine.
Yeah, that's very good. Well, Kyle, this has been a very interesting conversation. And for our viewers, my final question is that if they want to reach out to you in terms of your marketing services or even talking about what we discussed, how can they find you? Where are the best ways to connect with you?
Certainly. So we have Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Those are the three different platforms that I live on and update the most regularly. It is kylemerrick.actor on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. It's all the same. And then if you are interested in diving in, learning a little bit more about the coaching practice and anything about the marketing industry as a whole, that is where anarchyforaday.com comes in. Just hop over there and then you can pretty much get a direct line to me through there too.
Very good. I will put your contact details in the description of the podcast. But Kyle, thanks very much. This has been a very interesting conversation, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you. Perhaps we can do another one in the future and touch some other angles of this exciting comparison between hospitality and acting.
It's such an interesting conversation. Thank you, Sam, for having me.
Okay, now we've finished our conversation about the comparison and the parallels between acting and hospitality. So we're going to have off the mic. Now,
Okay.
Kyle Merrick, you're an actor, a strategist, and an anarchist thinker. Which one would your parents least understand if you had to explain it in one sentence?
Well, geez, now you're hitting me with all the hard questions. There's a lot that I do that I like, and I'm going to say all four of my parents are still alive. I was adopted at birth. So here's the deal.
Yeah.
Liz and John, they're the individuals that gave me the life that informs the conversation that you and I have had, Sam. And I love them dearly, and I appreciate to the extent that I wake up in the mornings, I got to say thank you to each of, my parents respectively for making the decisions that they did, because that gives me the foundation of the life that I have, which is also to say, given that I'm trying to be very clear about how grateful I am for the life I have, I don't think they know anything about what I really, really stand for. There's a tremendous disconnect between them. If they hear this, they're probably going to be angry about that, but I'll figure that out offline. The reality is anarchy. All right, mom was a lawyer. Dad was in marketing for law firms. Not politically speaking, but they operate in a fairly conservative sense. Dad probably understands a slight bit more of the edgier, creative realm. But broadly speaking, the number of risks that need to be taken simply to just have a semblance of an acting career are, to individuals who are in that former generation and, value the safety and consistency that brought on by, the corporate lifestyle, to somebody who's been an entrepreneur for 10 or so years. It's like just about nothing that I have done is registered as safe. There was a small period where I was looking for a full-time job, and my parents were like, "Oh, finally, we're so happy." And eventually I spun my coaching practice up out of that sort of period of necessity. And they were like, you're starting another job company yourself, and Not only that, you're calling it anarchy for a day? What are you doing? So needless to say, I can't quite vouch for the fact that they really stand behind anything that I really represent. I think they'd support me. I admire them for trying. But
Very good.
there's, yeah.
If you had to auction off one outdated business rule to the highest bidder, what rule is it, and what does it deserve to, why does it deserve to disappear forever?
One outdated business rule.
Yeah.
What a fantastic question. All right, so we've spent, I'd say, the vast majority of our conversation talking about the ability to pay attention, to listen, to discern, the state of which, somebody's experience is, very simply just walking through the lobby of your hotel, to improvising, to understanding and listening to what the fellow actor is giving you in that moment. This is one of those things where I very staunchly believe in transferability. Essentially, the world these days, we're so connected. You're in Finland right now. I'm in Colorado. We're in vastly different areas of the world, and yet we are here in direct conversation with one another. We can see each other. It's tremendous what technology has enabled. But now we have this ability to be so interconnected that we understand, all right, there are experts of all different categories, of all walks of life available in the world, that now if I'm an employer of any kind, I could have a very direct link to these experts if I'm so inclined. And so I think there's that mentality, and that's in part, you can translate that to the dating world too. I'm still single. This is not accounting for you. But, I think for women, they think, okay, well, I can find my 6'4" behemoth of a slender, buffed out dude if I so want to. But one of the realities is, I think for those who pay attention and can actually see the details, what very specific individuals in the world offer, that's where I bring in this concept of transferability. It's the transferable skills. Not everything is like, all right, I have one specific expertise and I will only work in the expert range that, these different corporate positions will offer. The transferability is to say, all right, maybe I was an actor. How is it that these skills translate into a hospitality role if I find myself applying for something like that? So to answer your question, Sam, it's like the concept of non-transferable skills, essentially. Are you catching on? Essentially, like the people that believe you need to have vast, deep, there is severe reality to a vast and depth knowledge base, but sometimes transferable skills can be just as good, if not even better.
Yes. Yeah.
So the transferability is something that I very staunchly believe in.
Very good.
Personally.
What's the most unprofessional thing you have learned actually works incredibly well in leadership or marketing?
Where are these questions coming from, man? These are great. Whether or not these are what you develop for everybody, or if they're just
no, these are
me.
Customized.
I love it. All right, think about this. If I've stood by anarchy, so anarchy for me in my vernacular, it is a tool to inspire innovation. Anarchy, I think dictionary defines it as destroy everything and cause complete and utter chaos. I do not believe in that, because that's just destroy everything for whatever reason. If you're a bit more tactical about where and when you essentially set yourself apart from the crowd, that's a very important way of operating. So anarchy, in my mind, it's a tool when used carefully. And if you especially base your practice in good business, then you can separate yourself for the right reasons in ways that people will still be very attracted to. So in other words, all this little speech about anarchy is to say, risk-taking. That's where, risks, there always comes the opportunity for failure. That's the necessary fine print that comes with this agreement. But risk-taking is what will innately set yourself apart from other individuals, because there are a lot of people that simply look at what everybody else is doing and they say, all right, well, it worked for them, so inevitably it can work for me, which is fine and dandy. But if you feel like soaring beyond where those individuals have gone, where you personally have ever gone, you're probably going to have to take a risk. And I'm not suggesting what that risk is, but that is essentially the notion, I think, to answer your question here. It's risk-taking. I'm not saying what or saying what specifically. It's circumstantial.
Yeah.
Be crazy enough, be stupid enough, be smart enough to listen, to understand circumstance so well that you understand, okay, well, this is what's safe. Maybe this is unsafe. But if I'm a poker player, I can see that there's a non-0% chance that this might actually be a very successful move if I take a bit of a risk in this moment. Sometimes risks really pay off.
Yeah. You get 1 day of total anarchy in one corporate boardroom. What's the first rule you break, and what surprising order do you put it in its place?
No pants, first off. No, the total anarchy in a boardroom. I would really liken it to the improv sort of mindset. The improv ability is just very simply, it's the yes and. I'm not saying that you have to turn into a literal yes man. That's largely not a good thing. But, the concept of saying yes and, agree. To improvise is to say, okay, well, we can continue building on these different ideas. A boardroom, you hope that everybody's going to be fully engaged there. And so this would be that space to build, to ideate, to, create constructive feedback if need be. So, all right, improvising within the reason and bound of that, and allowing for no one in the room to say absolute, unequivocally no. I think simply removing that word no, that's that bit of anarchy. That is a fantastic bit to inspire innovation, creativity, just conversation that will get you from point A to a very interesting point B.
Very good. Thank you for being good sport. I just have 2 more, so please bear with me. What's one rule in business that everyone pretends to follow, but nobody actually does?
I'm very genuinely, that's a question I've never been asked before. I just, one of the, I don't know if this is quite going to answer the question, but I feel like this is a valid response, so I'm just going to barf it out and see what happens. Communication. It's one of the most critical pieces of business. We're in the age of AI taking over everything. Robots are going to take everything over and rule the world. But up until that point, humans are still pretty much driving this entire, bus, and we're here like it or not. So the human-to-human component within business is very key and critical. Now, within the marketing realm, one of the biggest issues, I cannot tell you how many people have come to me throughout the years and said, our individual, our team, very simply has just stopped communicating with us. Communication seems to have taken a backseat in business. And part of the reason that I and my partners kept and still keep all operations here in the U.S. is because we value localized personal touches. I'm not poo-pooing anybody who's, farming out to the Philippines or elsewhere to, bring the workforce in, but customer service. And this is huge in hospitality too. You need the human touch. Even though I understand like some hotels in Tokyo have robot staff already, implanted into the ecosystem. But for some reason, in today's day and age, and this translates far beyond marketing. I'm just simply remarking on that because I know the industry very well. It's just like so many people are horrible at communicating to their clients and customers, and they end up getting them into these terrible agreements that the clients end up wanting out of, but they're inexplicably stuck in it. So, for whatever reason, communication, that's the answer.
Excellent. If you had to delete one corporate word forever, what would it be?
HR.
Okay. What's more dangerous in leadership, ego or certainty?
I would potentially say that they are of equal. They can both be extremely deleterious
Okay.
to an ecosystem.
Okay,
I
the
can
final
expand
one.
on that, or that we could just leave it at that.
Okay. What's the most useful thing you learned that was never taught in business school?
Well, given that I never actually went to business school, and entrepreneurship, this
Yeah.
understanding of how is it that I run and operate a business, that has been my quote unquote business school. But there's the books, there's the mentors, there's all of the conversations that I've had. So, question one more time.
What's the most useful thing you learned that never was taught in business school? That doesn't mean you have to go to business school, but you may have, you understand what the curriculums are, and you met your friends or people who have gone to business school and they come in a certain mold. But what has been the most useful thing you learned that was never taught in business school, in your opinion?
Well, I'm trying to figure out which direction I want to take this, because there are, likely to no surprise here, and myriad different things that come to mind. Risk taking, if I want to simply echo my former answer, risk taking is huge, within the world of, investments and, whatnot, then, okay, business school probably touches on it. Now, the networking component, getting to know people in the industry and actually becoming a friend of theirs, not simply, somebody that is, in it for whatever the transaction is, but being a very genuine human. This is what makes humanity, and this is what makes doing business, in my mind, truly pleasurable, is because the individuals that I keep in my circle are just genuinely enjoyable people, and these are some of my favorite individuals. So that, I believe, is probably one of the most important components that throughout all of my schooling, and I believe that a lot of probably business school does not really remark on this. Most educational things don't, because until you're thrown deep into the pool of, all right, how is it that I make, business happen? How is it that I build relationships that are going to last? When you have to weigh those different things, then you figure, well, I can't be the salesperson that I thought I was, because I have to be the likable, affable individual, and perhaps out of necessity, out of circumstance, whatnot. Maybe it just reminds you, like, hey, we're all still human at the end of the day. This is a human-driven world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just the power of networking and friendship.
Very good. Okay, thanks, Kyle. I think this was the end of our Off the Mic. So thank you for tuning in to the Social Hotelier. If you enjoy this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. We have an incredible lineup of guests coming your way, so stay tuned for more thought-provoking conversation like I had with Kyle. Until next time, take care and keep exploring.
Sam, thank you so much for having me. What a great conversation.
Okay, we'll put the stop recording.